Hi, welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name is Robert Winters, and to my far left...
I'm Susanna Sagat, and I'm tweeting that we're doing this right now. How exciting is that?
Did you
And
text?
I haven't done it yet.
Were you texting while you were driving here? No, just
No,
kidding.
right now.
Okay.
Okay,
And-
there it is. You got the tweet. There it is.
All right. And between us is...
I'm Gavin Cleespies. I'm the director of the Cambridge Historical Society.
Right.
Hi, Gavin.
Hello.
I have a big question for you.
Sure.
Sorry, Robert.
That's okay.
Okay, this is the question I've always wanted to know. What is the difference between the Cambridge Historical Society and the Cambridge Historical Commission?
The Historical Society...
There are two things here.
Yes. We are older. We're the more mature of the two.
You seem quite young.
You can tell when you put Charlie Sullivan and me next to each other. No. So the Historical Commission was founded in 1905. We're a private, independent, nonprofit organization that's dedicated to preserving...
Commission?
You said commission.
Did I?
You meant to
Yeah,
say...
see, this is the problem. We confuse
Society.
it all the time.
Yeah.
It's a society.
Okay, the Cambridge Historical
Okay.
Society was founded in 1905. We're a private, nonprofit organization, which may be what people...
With membership.
Supported by members. We document the
I'm a
history of
member.
Cambridge.
I try to
Primarily-
be, and then I don't know how to sign up. So you're going to have to tell people how to sign up.
Primarily, we document social history, so families, organizations, clubs, businesses, things like that. The Cambridge Historical Commission was founded in 1964, and they were founded by the city of Cambridge to regulate the built environment in Cambridge. So
To regulate the built environment.
they handle landmark designation, historic district designation, neighborhood conservation district management. So they are the people who make sure that the historic structures in Cambridge remain intact and where they're supposed to be. So they are a part of the municipal government, and we're a private nonprofit. So they're supported by your tax dollars, and we're supported by membership.
And they probably have a board that is appointed by the city manager. And you have members
We
on the
have
board
members.
and dues.
Mhm.
We're supported by private philanthropy.
Right. And
Okay.
to join the Historical Society, you can visit our website, which is cambridgehistory.org, and there's a membership link.
Great. Okay, Robert?
Right? Now, it's not just an accident that we asked Gavin to come on the show tonight, because we wanted to have a little bit of fun talking a bit about some of the interesting Cambridge history. In particular, the period which I personally think of as sort of the golden era of Cambridge civic and political history, which was sort of the very late 1800s into maybe the first quarter or third of the 20th century. And one of the prime features of this period was actually related to the temperance movement of the time, which actually, what years do we sort of associate with the temperance movement nationally?
Well, tell people what the temperance movement is.
Actually, I think Gavin
Please.
probably and even more.
Nationally,
We're not that old.
All right, the temperance movement is the movement for prohibition, in favor of prohibition.
And prohibition means what?
It's the prohibition of the sale of alcoholic or intoxicating beverages. So there's a whole bunch of distinctions that are probably worth making that we probably don't have time for right now, but in essence,
tell us a good
it is
story. We want to hear the
when the
story.
country goes dry. And prohibition nationally is passed in 1919. It's the 18th Amendment that makes it illegal to sell alcohol in the United States, and is repealed in 1933. So the entire Roaring '20s and into the beginning of the Depression, it was...
There was no drinking. Imagine how it would have been if people actually drank during that period.
Well, some
They
people
did.
I don't want to know.
So at the time, it also became very popular that there were speakeasies, which was a term...
Well, can we go back a little bit?
Mhm.
What drove people to do this? Why did we have this amendment? It's not easy to do an amendment.
Right. No, it was a big
So
deal.
it was a big deal. Why did we do that?
Well, there's a lot of different interpretations of that, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think if you took everything at its face value, and you said what people said was the
Sure.
reasons, they were saying that alcohol was destroying particularly the poorest members of society. So the people who are the immigrant working classes who are living in the worst conditions were wasting their money and their paychecks on alcohol. The alcohol was having bad health effects on them and bad social effects. It was leading to violence. It was leading to crime. It was leading to lack of care of children and dissolutions of marriages. It was leading to all sorts of nasty stuff. If you look a little deeper, I think you can also make the case that part of what was going on was the country as a whole was shifting very dramatically into industrial production and urbanization. And this urbanization was being fueled by waves of immigrants coming into the country, many of whom looked very different from the populations that lived here before. And some aspect of the prohibition movement was an anti-immigrant movement that was sort of relatively thinly veiled, but was upset with the changing complexion of the American city.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Now, in a very local sense, I think it was about 1880 or thereabouts, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when the Massachusetts legislature must have passed either some enabling legislation that permitted individual towns to ban the saloon, right?
Yeah, so it's called the local option law.
The
Well,
local,
why would you have a saloon if there was nothing to drink?
This is before.
no, this
probably.
is, no,
before.
we're going back to,
Okay.
going back to like circa 1880-ish.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
Plenty of liquor. There
I wasn't paying
the
attention,
rum was
clearly.
flowing wildly in the streets there. And remember, the Irish wave of immigration sort of came with the potato famine back in the 1840s. So the population of Cambridge and Somerville and other surrounding towns here had really swelled. And many people perceive this as a pretty serious problem, but the legislature enabled towns to pass a no
Local
license
option,
provision to ban the saloon. How successful. Now, my understanding is that Cambridge was a little bit late to the game in the sense that our neighbor Somerville actually passed, which is kind of funny when I think of my views of Somerville today. They, please, I don't mean to offend my Somervillian friends.
They can't watch.
No,
This is a Cambridge show.
That's right. There we go. And they actually banned the saloon in Somerville in around 1881-82. And with that, of course, as you might expect, some of the operators of these establishments chose to sort of move right to the Cambridge line. And there was this proliferation for a period of years of these saloons around the Cambridge line. One of the accounts that I was reading talks about down around Jefferson Street in East Cambridge. I think they said where within the same block as the Jefferson Street School, there were 5 saloons, right, in an area that they used to call, what they call it, Tin Village, I believe,
Yeah.
right? Or the Lava Flats is another name I've heard it called. I have no idea about the basis of the name. I heard actually from Melissa Pacey, the Cambridge archivist at the Cambridge Main Library, that there was actually a growth of saloons up around the Somerville-Cambridge border up in North Cambridge as well, up around Cameron Avenue. But the one that I'm most familiar with, was in many ways the flashpoint for the movement in Cambridge, was the movement of a saloon on Kirkland Street. This was the saloon that actually moved to the site, which is now actually the site of the Savonore, where the Savonore's Market is today, which was directly across the street from the estate of, was it Charles
Eliot Norton.
Charles Eliot Norton, Professor Charles Eliot Norton to you, thank you very much, of Harvard University. And, in this sort of nice, peaceful setting, suddenly, right there across from the Harvard professor's home, is the saloon.
I bet he loved that.
Yes.
It's a really interesting location because his estate is called Shady Hill. And so today,
yes, yeah.
if you hear of the school Shady Hill, it's actually named for his estate because it was founded at the foot of his estate. And now it's across town, close to Strawberry Hill.
Right.
Just to confuse everyone.
Just to
Oh,
confuse
that's a good
everybody.
story.
Right. But it was, I don't know when I should know this, but the first year when the locals in Cambridge put on the ballot, because it was annual elections in those days, not every other year, they put on the ballot the question to ban the saloon. And in the first few years, it failed. I don't know exactly what the margin was. Actually, I do have it somewhere, but
I can actually tell you.
so great to have a historian here.
I just printed this out earlier today, but so it was first voted on in 1881, and it took 5 years to pass.
Yeah.
And they actually give the vote counts here in tremendous detail. So in the first year, in 1881, they thought that it had won. And the first ballot count, the no license vote had won by 46 votes. But then they recount, and they lost in the recount by 6 votes. And actually, in the history of the no license
So we were
movement,
doing recounts even back then.
they said that there were like the 5 main principles, and the first one they said is the importance of a single vote was always emphasized. The lesson of the first election, which was lost by a margin of only 6 votes, was never forgotten.
Yes.
So they did not forget that. And then in the following years, they lost by 393 votes, 594 votes, and then 1,137 votes.
So it was trending that
The
way
wrong
the other
way.
way. But
You know, I
then,
think that's right around the time that women were going
locally.
into office.
Yes.
And
yeah, you could vote in the local elections.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's around the same time.
Mhm.
I wonder
Could
if
be.
we had
Could-
any impact in that.
That's
Oh,
a
I think that it was
possibility.
very true.
Yeah. Now, in a letter from Charles Eliot Norton, dated in the Cambridge Tribune, dated April 27th, 1886. This was this grand letter that really kind of fired up everybody to sort of like turn the tide. So I guess when was the first year when the no license vote was successful?
1886.
So it was then later that year in 1886.
So Sigmund Freud was only 30. He was just starting out.
That's right.
Not very many issues. This is a weird time of history.
It was a
It
very
is.
weird time of history, but in fact, then it went. Now, I think my understanding is that for at least some time after the no license vote, the saloons continued to operate pretty much out in the open, which was this is in a way where the temperance movement meets sort of civic reform, at least the way I look at it, in the sense that now the people who feel that they've been successful in one aspect of this movement now say, well, this is crazy. These corrupt officials in City Hall are completely paying no attention. They're allowing these things to operate in the open. And this actually then leads to sort of a growth of the idea. It's no longer, in fact, they even coined a phrase within a few years. They called it the Cambridge idea, which incorporated sort of like absolute, the unacceptability of corrupt civic officials, nonpartisanship in government. So we should have no political parties in municipal government. That actually persists to this
That
day.
continues. When
But
you
that-
vote, you don't vote Democrat or
right?
Republican.
But this is where it grew from. And there were several others. I probably have them sort of floating around here in my various notes here. Oh yeah, it was the Cambridge idea was the banning of the saloon was primary, nonpartisanship in local government. I always like this one. It says, and a focus on local rather than national issues. Right? One of the fun things about looking back in history is you sort of see these parallels with discussions that happen today, and it just cracks me up, right? And it was hysterically funny. There's actually one great quote that I get a kick out of. I'll just read this quote. This is from John Fiske, speaking at the Sanders Theater on June 2nd of 1896, had this to say: "Our city government has from the outset been upright, intelligent, and helpful. We are satisfied with it. We do not wish to change it. Now, to what cause or causes are we to ascribe the contrast between Cambridge and the cities that are so wretchedly governed? The answer is that in Cambridge we keep city government clear of politics. We do not mix up municipal questions with national questions. If I may repeat what I have said elsewhere, since the object of a municipal election is simply to secure an upright and efficient municipal government, to elect a city magistrate because he is a Republican or a Democrat is about as sensible as to elect him because he believes in homeopathy or has a taste for chrysanthemums."
That's pretty good.
You sort of have to love this period of history. When people did some oration, they didn't fool around. Anyway, it was interesting, and but anyway, this movement, this thing that came to be called the Cambridge idea, was then carried forth with pastors in local churches. They became really a major part of the organizing of that, right?
And there's a whole bunch of groups that become involved in this. So there's the first organization that starts pushing this is called the Home Protection League. They eventually morph into the Citizens No License Committee,
Right.
but they also spin off
Right, the Home Protection League, the Citizens No License Committee, meaning don't give saloons
No saloons.
licenses?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the whole movement is called the No License Movement, as
Okay.
in don't grant licenses to sell liquor. Because in 1880 or 81, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had passed a law allowing individual towns to grant licenses to saloons or to deny licenses to saloons. So they could say, you're operating with a license or you're operating without a license. The licenses were meant in part to create fees for the municipalities.
Right.
So they were an income source. So there had been saloons long before, but these were sort of unlicensed. And the idea was you now can you can require your saloons to pay you a licensing fee. But that also meant that you could require that there were no licenses available and therefore your town was dry.
Right.
So it was kind of a roundabout way to get there. But the No License Committee spins off the Law and Order League, which was organized in 1883 and it included 200, quote, 200 conservative citizens to aid in the enforcement of liquor laws, which sounds like a great fun
Really?
group to be a part of. People who are out enforcing the liquor laws and
Right.
telling the police how to do their job. And then there's a whole bunch of other individuals who are involved, including numerous priests and pastors. And it's actually an early melding of Catholic and Protestants working together.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about this for me is that for me a saloon is that cowboy movie bar where the cowboy comes up, puts the horse in the front and pushes the doors open. It's a Western saloon. I'm shocked that the East Coast had something called saloons. That's new to me.
Well,
Why is
well.
that? Why? How did that happen?
You know, it's just
I
terminology.
have to look that
you
up.
know?
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's the terminology of the day. Many of these saloons that didn't operate out in the open after the movement, they were disguised into these, clever, storefronts. I think I actually have a quote I'll find in a second here, where they were hidden into furniture stores, where they had all sorts of special devices and things. Actually, I think there was one right here. This is the one on Elliott Street. Not Elliott Street, across from Professor Norton's estate. They said it was licensed of a gilded saloon with large plate glass windows in the peaceful-looking building, and we actually have a picture of it.
Give me a picture. I'll put it up.
Do we have the one? Let's see.
No, that one. No?
Well, yeah, I
This is
think
the-
we may. Well, we'll find it. I actually have it on
No?
a site. Maybe we
Okay,
can do
we're
it
not
last
doing the
time.
fancy thing.
Right, at the end of Kirk's, right? But in this particular building, it was elaborately fitted with electric bells connecting with the bar so that the whole house could be notified of the entrance of the police.
I saw that movie.
Yeah. A large panel picture on the wall swung on hinges to cover a door leading to another part of the house where the supply of liquors was kept. And I love this. It says, a so-called Frenchman was also employed as an outside picket to give the alarm.
I did see that movie, right?
So this was happening in
That was
Cambridge. It was a
good.
great thing. But as the movement started to take off, and I think what really helped turn the tide in the banning of the saloon was actually a publication called The Frozen Truth. And I believe we actually
me-
have that
oh,
right here.
I'll
think
do
we're-
it. I did it.
No, I think we're
Right,
doing
it's
it.
done.
Oh, we got it?
Oh,
Okay, we
Very
go.
fancy.
Ah.
All right, and I have to say, this is actually the first time I've actually seen the image of what the actual
This is
paper
March
looked like.
5th, 1914.
Yeah, this is a
So this
later
is
edition.
a little later. And this is from the Historical Society's archival collections. It's from a collection called the Clergymen's No License Committee Records, which you can find on our website. There's a finding aid to it. There's a couple issues of The Frozen Truth in it. But The Frozen Truth was fascinating. It was started by a couple people who are the real movers and shakers behind the no license movement, most notably Francis Foxcroft.
Right.
And today on Cambridge Street, there's Foxcroft Manor, which is an apartment building. So you can look at it and think, oh, yeah, Francis Foxcroft, which I think it actually has some reference to his family's
Yeah.
estate. So,
All right, we're gonna move this back to us human beings for
Can
a
I
moment.
just
here.
point one thing out?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, at the very bottom here, it says vote no. The license question is the last question on the ballot on the third page. Oh, we're thinking voting is tough now.
Well, you know, actually, there was a movement. I have a book by Professor Monroe from 1925, which was, I think, a Harvard course in government at the time, was all about the simplified ballot. This was a big part of civic reform ideas nationally, not just in Cambridge, of the early 1900s, was the simplified ballot. So no longer should you be voting for the dog catcher and the this and the that and 78 other officials, but in fact you should just be voting for like the mayor and a few city councilors, and then there would be a lot of the previously elected positions would become appointed positions.
well, it's actually interesting in this. So there's an article in a journal printed by the Historical Society from 1906 through the 1990s called The Proceedings, which we've digitized and put on our website. And one of the articles, which was an essay read on January 22nd of 1918, was written by Francis Foxcroft, or Frank Foxcroft. And in that, he talks about how difficult it was to get people to vote for the issue one way or the other,
Yeah.
because he said that they had to distribute the no ballots. So that it wasn't a printed ballot that they filled in
Oh, you
the
had to
ovals.
take the no.
You had to take the no ballot in with you. So they
I see.
actually had to have people at the ballots handing out all the, the ones to include. So it was apparently tremendously more complicated.
So they made it as difficult as possible in order
Well, it
to
makes sense.
vote that way. Yeah, no, that's pretty amazing. Actually, there was one other thing. Okay, so that was it was 1886 after the campaign. The Frozen Truth was mailed to all Cambridge voters.
Which in this one in particular that we looked at looked like a voter education piece.
Right.
Yeah, it was much more later on. I mean, the thing is that at that point, the no license had become kind of established. And as Gavin pointed out earlier, there was just 1 year for over a 47-year span until the repeal of Prohibition when Cambridge was dry. Was it 1919?
Yeah, it was after the U.S. government had passed the amendment to enact prohibition. Cambridge, just sort of to be sort of
Contrarian.
standoffish, legalized alcohol consumption for like the remaining 6 months of that year, so that it was legal to drink in Cambridge for part of 1919. But then in 1920, national prohibition went into effect, and it was illegal nationally.
All right. There's one hysterical thing. This is so by 1896 people were celebrating. There was the book. It was like a jubilee book on 10 years of no license, and 1896 was really like the big year for Cambridge, where they felt very proud of all of these wonderful reforms and nonpartisanship in government, etc. But and it's written about in the 50-year anniversary of the city. That was actually the 50th anniversary of Cambridge. But what I found interesting, I was reading some of the 50th anniversary book, but then I jumped ahead to the 75th anniversary book, which was published in 1921. And in it, there's just this hysterical quote from a Professor Thayer, I think it is. Was it? Yeah, Professor William Thayer at the 75th anniversary book in 1921. He made the following observation. He says, at the celebration of the semi-centennial of Cambridge in 1896, various speakers emphasized particularly the glories of Cambridge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he says here, speaking about the Cambridge idea and the no saloon movement, he says, I suspect it would not have been so popular had not all the saloons of Boston remained wide open to welcome thirsty visitors from Cambridge.
Public transportation.
It says, the fare on the streetcars, which were then replacing horse cars by electricity, was only 5 cents. And, furthermore, wet goods, in quotes, could be delivered in Cambridge at a very low charge by the express companies.
Right.
So in other words, all during this golden period, where Cambridge was supposedly dry, in fact, if you really wanted a drink, it was never an issue. It was very simple.
Oh, and it is certainly true that Charles Eliot Norton, while he may have been upset about the saloon opening across the street from him, there was no chance he was not serving wine at dinner.
Exactly. Exactly.
And if he went to a friend's house, he expected them to do the same, and it was it was not a dry town. It was just no saloons.
Yeah. Now, there's one other great quote from Professor Thayer here. It says, now the 18th Amendment, for good or ill, has made no license obsolete. The second part of the Cambridge idea, nonpartisanship in local politics, which we believed would be permanent, this is 1921 now, has also disappeared during the past quarter of a century. But let us hope that, like the 17-year locust, it will return so that its disappearance may not mean its extinction.
That's pretty good.
Right? Now, and this was a period then when, I think actually in the intervening years, 1911, there had been a charter reform move for Cambridge. It failed, but it was actually the first introduction of the idea of proportional representation, but it failed. In 1915, there was an actual charter change, so the civic reform aspect of this whole Cambridge idea was very much continuing. And I would certainly argue that, in fact, as the 20s passed into the 30s, eventually the move to the Committee for Plan E and the Plan E Charter was really just the next step in a sort of a sequence of events, of civic reforms that really kind of grew out of this period. And that's actually the Plan E Charter is the charter which we use today.
Right, which confuses everyone. But I think that's very much true in that it was a movement to professionalize services. And also in both of these cases, there's a little bit of an anti-immigrant feel
Absolutely.
to it. So the desire
Protectionism.
the desire to ban the saloons was, the unattractive consumption of alcohol. It wasn't all the alcohol. It was the people who were getting drunk and falling over and making a mess. That's what they wanted to get rid of, and that was associated with the lower class and the immigrants who were coming in. And the same way that the Plan E system and the professionalization of government was in part meant to get rid of the patronage.
That's right.
That was so rife throughout the system, and that I think
That's right.
it was it Tip O'Neill's father was the superintendent of
Sewers, and he gave out the teaching jobs.
Yeah, he had like two or three
Exactly.
teaching jobs he got to a point.
Now, on that note, we're going to have to take a break for a few minutes here. So until then, this is
You'll
Cambridge.
come right back, right?
All
Good.
right, Cambridge Inside Out.
And we're out.